Hello there, learners. Welcome back to Read, Write, Roar. It's me again, Mrs. Spear, and we are continuing on our journey to write an informational text. I've been studying the topic of frogs. You might be doing frogs with me or something else at home, but the important thing is we are learning that we need to know the answer to these questions. What are some ways that plants and animals meet their needs so that they can survive and grow? And then how are animal parents or adults and their babies or offspring similar and different? Before we get started today, I want to talk to you about something that's really important for you to know how to do. I want you to be able to summarize. Can you say the word summarize? Great job. Here's what it means to be able to summarize. Summarize. When you summarize, you think about ideas you've learned and describe them by writing or telling in a sentence or a few sentences. So you take a lot of information and make it small to tell someone about it. We have learned a lot about frogs. So today we're focused on something new. We're going to be focusing on the second question about animals and their babies. But before we do that, I wanted to show you how I would summarize the things that we've learned about so far. So here's what I wrote in a sentence about all the things I just told you. This is my summary. To understand what frogs need to grow and survive, we have learned about their habitat, body, diet, and ways they communicate and move. Would you agree? Great. I took all those big ideas and many different types of learning and put it into this one big sentence. So now that we know what it means to summarize, we're going to put some of this into action because we're going to be looking at facts about adults and offspring and trying to write a summary together. So I'm going to read this list to you, and I want you to give me a thumbs up if it's something you remembered learning about adult frogs. Here we go. Adult frogs have lungs to help them breathe. Adult frogs hop, jump, or leap. No tail, right? Adult frogs don't have a tail. Good remembering. Strong limbs. That would mean their front and their hind legs. They're very strong, right? So that they can, right? So they can hop or jump or leap. Tiny teeth. That's something new I learned when I was reading. That only on their top jaw, they have tiny teeth to help them to be able to grab their food and put it into their mouth. So they grab it with their tongue and then they give it a little push with their tiny teeth in their top jaw. Long tongue, we knew that, right? And they eat bugs, snails, and worms. Did you remember that? They make sounds to communicate, which we just talked about a little bit. And they live on land and in water. Did you remember that as well? Can you remember the word that we talked about? That frogs are this big long word. It means they live on land and in water. Amphibians. Nice job. So now let's think about our tadpoles and how they're different. Give me a thumbs up when you remember this fact. Tadpoles have gills. Do you remember that? Yeah, the gills help them to breathe, remember? They have a tail and a fin to swim. Remember that part too? They have something called keratin instead of teeth. It's something hard that helps them to chew with their mouth. They eat jelly from an egg and scrape plants or algae. Okay, so they use that keratin on their mouth and they scrape plants and algae from rocks and pebbles because they don't have, when they're swimming around underwater, they're just using that keratin to scrape things. They don't have big teeth. They don't have that tongue to be able to get big things and be able to swallow them. And lastly, we know live in water. Did you remember that about tadpoles? Great remembering. So now we need to think about, and you may already be thinking about, how are they the same? Can you think of something that you think is the same about a frog and a tadpole? Is this something you thought of? Did you think that they're both amphibians because they're like the same? Yeah, one is just the baby of the adult. Did you think they can both swim? Yeah, both frogs and tadpoles swim. They both need water. Is that something that you thought about? And they both need to breathe. Did you think about that too? Yeah, we just know that frogs, when they're adults, breathe with lungs, and tadpoles breathe with their gills. So this is important for us to remember because we're really trying to answer that second question over here about how animals, the adults and the offspring, are similar or the same and different. So our Venn diagram helped us with that. And as we've been learning and studying, we've been remembering and using our life cycle here to think about the changes that are happening over time between frogs and tadpoles. What I'd like to do with you now is take all this information that we just did together and bring us back to our new learning to be able to summarize. So we want to be able to take all these big ideas and put them into just a couple of ideas for ourselves for our remembering. Okay, so let's think about that word similar and how adult frogs and tadpoles are the same, thinking about what we learned here. I'm going to say an idea and I want you to read it with me, okay? Frogs and tadpoles are amphibians. Can you read that with me? Frogs and tadpoles are amphibians. We came up with that idea based on the chart that we made. Our next idea, frogs and tadpoles swim, right? That's another idea that we knew. Read that with me. Frogs and tadpoles swim. Great reading and stopping at the period. The third idea, when we go back here, we learned that they need water and the need to breathe. We also have talked about the different food they eat when we were looking at these two sides. So I wrote this as a summary. Frogs and tadpoles need water, food, and air to live because what we breathe is air. Let's read that one together. Frogs and tadpoles need water, food, and air to live. Excellent. Wow, you're doing so much thinking and learning with me today. Thank you. What our next step is to take these three ideas about them being amphibians, about swimming, and about the things they need, and to write them into some sentences. So let's do that part together right now. Instead of just writing frogs and tadpoles, I was thinking we might start our sentence with the word both. Would that work? We could say, both frogs and tadpoles are amphibians. What do you think? Okay. Letter B. I'm going to start with an uppercase letter. And here's our little trick we've been using. That will help me remember. Start with an uppercase letter, spaces between my words, and punctuation at the end. I'm going to just put that right here so I remember to check it. I'm starting to write the word both. B-O. Letter O. The F is TH. Both. Now I'm wondering, we've done this idea. Could we combine idea number 2 about them swimming and that they need food, water, food, and air? Could we put those two together and say something like, frogs and tadpoles swim and need food, water, and air to survive? Yeah, we could probably write that in one sentence, right? When we summarize, try and use as least amount of words we can. So let's do that. We're going to start again. Frogs. Let's read that sentence. Frogs and tadpoles swim and need food, water, food, and air to survive. Excellent job. So now we're thinking about how tadpoles and frogs are different from one another. So we're going to think about that. And then these are the other ideas that I'm going to make sure I include in my writing here. Here's the first idea I wrote down. Tadpoles breathe with gills at first. Frogs breathe with lungs. And we were able to use our Venn diagram to help us think about those things, right? So I'm going to put that idea up here just for now. The second big idea that I want us to think about is this one. Tadpoles swim with their tails, but frogs swim with their strong legs. Remember, On our Venn diagram we just did, we talked about that, right? So let's make sure we include that idea. The third idea I want to make sure I include is this one. Tadpoles eat plants and algae. Frogs eat bugs, snails, worms. I have etc. That means etc. Like things like that. Let's read this one together. Tadpoles eat plants and algae. Frogs eat bugs, snails, worms, etc. Nice reading. So now you have a job to do. These three ideas about how the differences between how frogs and tadpoles breathe, how they swim, and what they use to swim, and what they eat are things I want to make sure that I get into my writing. So I want you to be listening and thinking, did I get those things? So here we go. I'm going to read it. Tadpoles go through a great change or metamorphosis to become a frog. They start out eating plants and algae, using keratin to help them chew. Is that one of the ideas that I was thinking about? Yeah, but they eat plants and algae. As frogs, they eat small insects, snails, and worms. Did I get that idea? Yeah, I'm going to stick this over here because I remembered that part. Tadpoles breathe with gills at first, while frogs only breathe with lungs. Was that an important idea I needed? Yes, which one was that one? Idea number 1, okay. To get around, tadpoles swim using their tail and frogs use their strong legs. Is that another idea I wanted to get? It was. This idea right here. So what we really learned to do was to use a tool. The tool we used was our Venn diagram to put all of our ideas. Think about how things were different or the same. We did a summary of ways that frogs and tadpoles were the same. And then we did a larger summary of the differences between tadpoles and frogs.
This program is made possible in part by the Michigan Department of Education, the State of Michigan, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Additional support by viewers like you. Thank you.